Hi, I'm Sally Rodgers from A Man Called Adam, and you're listening to the House Culture Podcast.
House Culture.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the House Culture Podcast. I'm your host and managing editor at House Culture, Matt Rouse. As always, thanks for joining us, downloading, streaming, however it is you listen to your podcasts. And for those who are listening for the first time and don't know who we are or what we stand for, we at House Culture are a group, a gang, a collective of house music fans who have come together through their mutual love of the beat to celebrate the spirit of house music. You can follow us day to day on our Instagram feed at houseculturenet. But what we do with this podcast is sit down with some of the most iconic characters from the scene for a candid chat to discover how they fell in love with the music and how it shaped their life. In this episode, we chat with Sally Rodgers, one half of A Man Called Adam and the First Lady of Balearic House. As you're hearing this podcast, Sally and her musical partner Steve Jones have been there since the very beginning of the dance music explosion on Ibiza.
It was this crazy circus of naked Rastafarians and old men with white suits and beards and amazing ambient music with sunsets over the Mediterranean.
We learn about the creation of that most beautiful A Man Called Adam track, one that is so intrinsically linked with the White Isle.
Barefoot in the Head is our crack, that sort of Chicago sound, our sort of attempt at making a house record that sounded like the records that we loved and we were enjoying.
We chat about Sally's love of getting behind the decks.
You're playing music for your friends and you're making friends with the music you're playing. You're making new friends with it. So it's a real reciprocal situation, and that's my favourite thing.
And we also hear her describe why this type of music is so important to us all.
Because it's full of love and it's full of open-spirited generosity and tolerance.
So, as they say in Barefoot in the Head, put a seashell to your ear, let it all come back, as for the next hour or so, we're in conversation with Sally Rodgers.
House Culture.
I'm sat here with Sally Rodgers from A Man Called Adam in a flat in East London, surrounded by some of the most obscure vinyl I've ever seen, and we're going to have a chat ahead of her gig this evening at the Century Club in central London, bringing obviously the Balearic spirit over to the capital. So thanks for your time, Sally. It's good to
No
meet you.
problem, Matt. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So really what we want to do is just start at the beginning for you in terms of music. How old were you when you first discovered music and it really kind of had an impact on you?
Oh gosh, my parents ran working men's clubs in the northeast. It was also a bit Irish. My dad's family, my dad's parents were sort of first generation, second generation Irish. So it was a lot of singing and a lot of all of my relatives basically had a signature song. You know, my Uncle Mick, it would be Ruby, or Kenny Rodgers, or my dad was a Dean Martin, or King of the Road was one of my dad's favourite tracks. Is it Roger Miller? So even as a little baby, me and my sister used to come in and do songs from the sort of Hollywood musicals and things to entertain my parents when we were, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old. So yeah, music's always been there. My elder brother and my sister were both, well, my elder brother particularly was a sort of vinyl collector. And he had amazing tastes. You know, he loved the Beatles, and we had every Beatles record that was ever made and all of the solo albums and everything that went from there, all of the obscure studio outtakes and the same with the Beach Boys. He had all those box sets of all of that, but he was also a huge reggae fan, which was and quite early doors for that, really, in the kind of 70s. So the house was full of reggae.
Amazing.
Always, yeah. And I acquired some of that vinyl recently, and I was gifted some of that vinyl recently, and yeah, there's some amazing things there. Obviously, when I was little, I liked, I don't know, the obvious ones, the Israelites or the little Desmond Dekker kind of jolly little pop things, the Rocksteady. But in the collection, there's these, the ones I tend towards are these things called disco 45s, where the reggae artists have kind of appropriated the disco format, if you like, the 12-inch disco format. But yeah, so there was that. My sister was a punk, so there was all Stiff Little Fingers and The Clash and all of that was in the house.
It's a real melting pot.
Yeah, before that she was kind of a bit of a disco dolly. I was a mod. So there hasn't really been, I can't really remember a time when music wasn't important in my life.
Yeah.
We weren't a household that you'd call musical in the sense that we were playing musicians, but we're all singers and writers, I think, actually, or performers in some ways. You know, we write. That's what we do. Yeah. But there's a singing tradition. Yeah. In that ethnicity, if you want to call it. Okay. That sort of third, fourth generation Irish, it's still there.
So growing up, was it always the aim to do something with music, or were you in bands before? I
always, when I was little, I wanted to be a vet, and I wanted to be an airline pilot, and I wanted to be, all sorts of things that take a lot of years and years of education to achieve. And then when I got to 15, I didn't want to go to school anymore. So, so the arts sort of, I was always good at English. I liked to write, and then I started playing in a few bands. I was sort of singing in a few bands, and then I moved to London. I was here when I was 17, so I went sort of straight into bands and singing backing vocals for this band and that band. It was kind of Pepsi and Shirley and the girls who were the backing singers in the Human League, that kind of thing. Okay, so everybody wanted a backing singer, a little dolly backing singer. So I did quite a bit of that. And then I answered an ad in the Melody Maker. Producer seeks vocalist. I answered quite a few of those, but there was one guy, and we formed a band called the Espresso 7, and we signed to CBS. So that was I was 18.
Wow.
So that was my first...
Your first exposure to...
Proper band, proper recording studios, proper recording. And I was pretty hooked on it after that. I don't think I'd wanted to be a singer. It's pretty brutal, that working men's club world. Yeah. Some of those singers that sing in those places are hugely talented and kind of resilient, and I didn't have that. Yeah, thick-skinned. I didn't have that at all. I was a bit, art school dropout, really.
So, obviously, so you had a bit of a taste of the official music industry with CBS, was it Espresso 7?
Yes.
What kind of music was that? Was that something that...
It was Latin jazz, really. Okay. Latin jazz pop.
Yeah.
It was kind of the mid-80s, 85, 86, 87.
Yeah.
So it was sort of, Latin jazz, pop. It was all very kind of Blue Rondo a la Turk, and all of those people had kind of been before, and it was on the kind of tail end of all that. Sade, it was that world. Yeah. That was the Espresso 7, and then that band split up. I split up with that guy, and we then you get like a period to demo for the label, so they can decide whether they want to carry on with the contract. So I auditioned some musicians, including Steve, and we formed a band called Adam. And then that was we didn't get picked up by CBS. That didn't happen. We did one recording for them, and then after that we were a man called Adam, and then it was sort of onto Giles's label, onto Acid Jazz and all of that sort of stuff.
So you obviously signed to Acid Jazz and Giles Peterson, and it was obviously Acid Jazz music.
We were still doing that sort of acoustic Latin jazz, real musicians, real musicianship, horn sections, percussionists. The lineup for a man called Adam when we played live, which we did quite regularly for Giles, was like 10 people on stage. So that's how we recorded the first recordings with a friend of ours, Matt Clark, in his little... He ran the Westminster Basement Youth Club recording facility, and we used to do it in the middle of the night, midnight till 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. And we recorded those first records like that as sort of acoustic Latin jazz. But then Matt brought a sampler, an Akai sampler, into the studio, and we started messing about with drum machines and using them as sequencers and sampling.
So what year was that?
87, 88, I think. 88, probably. And so the music became, we took the source material that we had, all the amazing musicianship and all the players and everything, and then we started to kind of electronically cut it up, abstract it. And then we went to raves and understood that language was something that it was kind of technology led, really. There was a new musical language that was coming out of Chicago and Detroit and all of those places, and I suppose we were excited by that intense creativity, as everybody was. I guess. That was acid house.
A completely new thing, and this new technology that with making sounds not necessarily being used maybe for the things that they were meant to use.
No, totally sort of misappropriated technologies. Things. We were using drum machines to trigger piano sequences and looping yourself, repeating phrases, and there's a kind of a process of abstraction, so things get more and more stripped back, and you're looking for those. Something like one of our tracks, we had a B-side called Amoeba, and it was, the A-side was a Spanish disco track called Música de Amor, Latin jazzy disco sort of something. But by the time it became Amoeba, and believe it or not, they're the same record, just one in various degrees of abstraction. The key little phrase that came out of the lyric was "no happy faces," and of course Acid House was all about happy faces. So it was like a distillation of a whole lyric down to a tiny phrase, and there was something really exciting creatively about that. So.
And did you see that kind of, once you created those B-sides, did you see them in a club environment and reaction to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So people like Harvey and Chocky with their Tonka sound system, they loved Techno Powers, which was the B-side of Earthly Powers, which was a kind of Lonnie Liston Smith style jazz funk workout kind of thing. But then Techno Powers was this machine version of it, and they loved it. The guys at sort of Centre Force Radio, the pirate radio stations, loved that record. And then you start to see it out, and we did lots of PAs and lots of performances around those records in places like Solaris or big raves in fields in the middle of Cambridgeshire or whatever. It was definitely a step away from that kind of acoustic Latin jazz scene. And Giles went off to do Talking Loud and do his thing. We've talked about that recently. Me and Giles, we've sort of hooked up again after years and years and years. So we talk about that stuff. It's funny.
Yeah, I was like you say, it kind of went two different ways. So for you guys, were you seeing how these kind of more electronic-led music was kind of performing, and you were like, okay, well, this is the route for us to go down?
Honestly, there was no strategizing going on then. We were very young. We just went where it was creative and fun and exciting for us to go. I don't think we thought about this is the right career move for us, or this is it just, and we still do that, really. It's sort of instinctively what excites you and what stimulates you, and you wouldn't, not saying I don't strategize a bit about other things, but when it comes to the music, that takes you don't take it. And
so that had kind of happened. My first exposure to a man called Adam was the short film about chilling, the 1990 documentary. It went out on Channel 4. I mean, I was only 10, but I do remember. I do remember seeing that, and 808 State were on it, and I was a big 808 State fan, and I'd been to Ibiza before, but with my parents on like a family holiday, obviously. So it was kind of strange to see these people that I really respected as musicians living this life in this island that I'd been to. And do you want to just talk about how did that come about? You being featured on that documentary?
I think we'd we'd recorded Barefoot in the Head, and we'd put it on a white label, and there was label interest in it. A bidding war would be overstating it somewhat, but there were people interested in signing the band, and we had management and that kind of thing. So eventually we decided we were going to sign with Big Life Records, and our manager Lisa went to them and said, there's this thing happening in Ibiza. We'd played for the Flying Guys and Charlie Chester and all that lot before the records, and Barefoot in the Head was kind of bubbling on that scene, so it made sense. And Lisa knew that. She was smart enough to know that, and she was like, they really ought to go. Angus and Kevin Sampson and Angus Cameron were making a movie out there. The Happy Mondays were going to be there, the Farm were going to be there, Andrew and Danny and everybody, big DJs, and we ought to be there because we've got one of those records that's hot on the scene, if you like. So they grumbled about it, and I think they gave us 500 quid towards going. And so we ended up on this thing, not really having any idea what to expect at all. We'd never been to Ibiza. And the film, apparently, talking to Kevin and Angus, there is a director's cut, and Channel 4, or there was a director's cut. Channel 4 made them cut quite a lot out, quite frank conversations about drugs and things, which is such a shame, because now it would be fine and it would be amazing to hear Andrew talking about ecstasy or something. It would be just amazing. But at the time, Channel 4, they brought it back. Channel 4 were like, what the hell is this? They cut it endlessly, but it still went out. And it's just one of those things where sometimes you're in the right place at the right time. Like I say, it was Lisa's instinct was good on that. And it's weird how it resonates with people. I get people talk to me about that film once a week at least.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. We're always grateful to have been part of anybody's journey, really. I don't, maybe.
Yeah.
Ask me if it's all people ever talk about for the rest of my life. Then maybe ask me when I'm 90, and let's see if I'm still high tolerance of it. But no, it had huge sort of ratings at the time. I think it was the biggest ever youth television broadcast that certainly that channel had ever had, but I think generally. And then they kept repeating it, and then people have sent me photographs of their like battered VHS copy of it with a sort of hand-drawn sleeve on it, and it was important to young people, I think. And why beautiful scenery, people having fun. Actually, the quality of the music was all pretty great.
The soundtrack on it is incredible. The selection. So that combination of those things. If you wanted to get really analytical, it was sort of the fag end of Thatcher's time in office, and there was a kind of underclass that wasn't represented by... Well, that's kind of what Acid House was, wasn't it? Absolutely.
There was a political aspect to it. I suppose what preceded that was that sort of Sade and the kind of wine bar and the yuppies and the sort of city wankers kind of thing, and Acid House represented something else, and so that this was a sort of Acid House utopia, maybe, that people could see on the screen. And
the film, I suppose, came out before the legislation, the Justice Bill, and all of that.
I think so.
I think, was it 92, the Justice?
Right, yes. Then yes, it was 1990, wasn't it? Ibiza 90. And those venues and from a personal point of view, it was just a sort of crazy mad fun.
Brilliant.
Just crazy mad fun.
As it should be.
Yeah, everybody was just mad, and that we saw things we'd never seen. And
so you'd never been to Ibiza before that?
No, and there's a sort of cliche about it, but it really was. It was as if you'd gone to Studio 54 or something like that. It was this crazy circus of naked Rastafarians and old men with white suits and beards and models in Chanel dancing on. It was things you just hadn't experienced. Amazing ambient music with sunsets over the Mediterranean, and most of us were just young working class people who hadn't really ever lived that before. So it was crazy.
Completely cosmopolitan European lifestyle.
Yeah, I remember turning up at the Coup club, which became Privilege. And it was like Bridget Nielsen was there, do you remember? And she was about 7 foot tall. She was like an Amazonian woman. Just the glamour was sort of radiating off her. And I think she was with Nils Lofgren or someone. She was dating somebody really famous. And it was all sort of MTV cameras, paparazzi, all of that kind of thing. And we'd never seen anything like that. I'm not saying that was the focus of the holiday. It was just things like that.
Yeah.
We'd never
That was like a scene
before.
that was happening.
Yeah, just that mix of people that you got there. Yeah, it was exciting. It was fun.
And how often do you go back to Ibiza now?
Well, because of Barefoot in the Head and because of the Café Del Mar albums, we were there pretty much every summer during the 90s and maybe the early noughties as well. We were backwards and forwards quite a lot. But then we had a sort of hiatus from it. And I've been again every year for maybe the last 3 years. 2 of my best girlfriends live on the island, and lots of my friends live there. And lots of my friends are there in the summer. And so I go and do a little sort of poolside warm-up for Harvey, and I do a set at La Torre. Basically, you sort of sing for your supper. You play records for a chip supper somewhere. And I see my girlfriends, and I have a nice time. I don't really get too involved in the club scene. Yeah. I do the little things I like to do. Yeah. Harvey at Pikes is what else could be better, really. And a sunset at La Torre, always nice to play records with the sun going down. Yeah.
And would you say between then and now, what has been the major differences? Like somewhere like La Torre might not have existed.
No, I think Javier and the guys sort of conceived La Torre to go back to that slightly more esoteric sound, and because Cafe Mambo and Cafe Del Mar now are on the kind of main strip, and Cafe Del Mar still has a sort of chilled vibe, but Mambo is very much the kind of pre-party warm-up. It's pretty banging in there. It's quite a good laugh, but it's pretty banging. So yeah, I think they thought of La Torre as some antidote to that. But there's always lovely beaches where you can hear nice music and things in Ibiza, I think. Well, you interviewed John Strincher, didn't you?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, there's Andy Wilson and all those guys. They all play lovely music. There's lovely music to be heard. I love the radio in Ibiza. There's sort of Ibiza Sonica, and then there's another one, and there's a couple of like franchised European ones, and you just dial through when you're in the car, and there's always some lovely electronic music to listen to. So I still enjoy it. But sorry, what was the question? It was how has it changed?
How has it changed?
How has it changed?
Or maybe it hasn't changed. Maybe it's beginning to shift back, like you say, like somewhere like La Torre, to kind of recapture that spirit.
Probably not, because I did go to Pasha a couple of years ago, and it was Masters at Work and Dimitri from Paris. So wow, that's going to be ace. We went in early with a friend of ours who was warming up, so we saw the whole place coming together. They had a sort of neon Eiffel Tower, and it was in the booth, and there was like 8 CDJs all set up for Masters at Work, and it was all like, oh yeah, this is going to be really exciting. And then they just, personally, I think they put too many people in the place. I'm not sure what the capacity is, but it was heaving and it was oppressive, and you could, moving from one place to another, there was no room actually to dance. You were packed like sardines. And I just thought, my instinct told me that there was kind of greed at the bottom of this. Well, 1,000 people less, and everybody would have had a better time. Yeah. But sort of having a good time.
Supply and demand, isn't it?
Yeah, they're seasonal. I guess they've all got to make their money in that season. But
the bad side of dance music capitalism.
Yeah, it's not for me. I don't want to be in it. there's plenty of places you can go and listen to lovely music, have a dance, and not have to suffer that.
That's what Ibiza offers so much more. It's kind of always like people I speak to who have never been to Ibiza always think it's just about the super clubs. It's like when you go to Glastonbury, people think it's just about the main stage. It's not. It's, there's so much more to see.
No, and that's it. And I think Harvey's residency at Pikes has done something wonderful as well in the last few years, because it's just made them programme really cool, interesting things at that venue particularly. But La Torre is always sort of the go-to place for the visiting DJs from that scene, and you'll hear some lovely music there as well. And there's great labels, there's a place for music that is not thumping dance floor bangers.
Yeah.
There's a place for all that other music.
Yeah,
and it's
the Balearic music.
Yes, I've been. Did you notice that? Was I avoiding that word? I don't. Yeah, but I guess that's what it is.
Yeah. And so we've talked about La Torre. Is that your favourite place to play on the island? Would you say?
Yeah, I guess so. And again, I like the poolside gig at Pikes. They're just places where you can be with your friends. Everybody's having a nice experience. You're playing music sort of for your friends, and you're sort of making friends with the music you're playing. You're making new friends with it. So it's a real reciprocal situation, and that's my favourite thing, really.
What DJing's all about.
Well, I think so.
Cool. You mentioned Barefoot in the Head. How did you come to write that? Obviously, it was before you'd been to Ibiza that you wrote and recorded that. When you hear it now, it's become so intrinsic with that island. I can't separate the two. But to think that there was a time that track was created before it even made it to Ibiza.
It was, again, like I say, but they had been, I think, Charlie and Andrew and those guys, that flying crew and the Boys Own and all of that, it was pretty Balearic, and they'd picked up that record. They'd kind of assimilated that record into their canon, if you like. And one of the records you asked was a sort of catalyst, and we'll talk about those later on, was Frankie Knuckles' Tears. And really, in a way, Barefoot in the Head is our kind of crack at that sort of Chicago sound, if you like. Obviously, it doesn't sound like a Chicago record because it's, two art school dropouts in a flat in Camden. It's not, but it really was our sort of attempt at making a house record that sounded like the records that we loved and we were enjoying. And also the lyric is about the drug, really, frankly.
All the best ones are usually.
I love a good metaphor. Let's say I use the drug as a metaphor for a love song or it's about freedom of spirit and all of those things that were pretty zeitgeist at the time. And that association you make it with Ibiza is a direct result of that film, the two things. If the film didn't exist, the association with Ibiza for Barefoot in the Head would also not exist. So that's why I'm never pissed off about talking about these things, because they're an amazing example of sort of synchronicity, really. And actually acid house and the emancipating effects of ecstasy and all of that stuff was about synchronicity. So we managed to sling some of it down onto a recording, a sound recording, and get a little tiny bit of that feeling onto a record. I'll always be happy and grateful and never get tired of that.
Do you have the temptation to drop it in any of your DJ sets?
Never. We've never been able
People
to do
request
that.
it.
I remember going to, we went to Kenny and Luke Solomon Kenny Hawkes and Luke Solomon used to have a brilliant club called Space in the 90s, and that was when they started bringing all the American house DJs and Derek Carter, and they introduced us all to that amazing kind of jackin house. And I think Steve Silk Hurley played, And he played all his own mixes, and he even had like idents that went Steve, silk, hurley. We were always a bit like, why can't we do that? Oh, a man called Adam. We ought to have done that, but no, it's not. It's not in our instincts, really.
So to go into more current things, we were talking earlier. You have released a new album, you and Steve, this year.
We have
Farmarama.
Yes,
it's fantastic. I love it. It really harks back to your previous 2 albums. You've been on hiatus. It's been a while. Why did the time kind of feel right now?
It's a weird one, isn't it? Again, it's a kind of instinctive thing. I don't want to get too heavy about it. Steve and I went off and we've been studying, and we also did a lot of sound design and experimental work. I think we wanted to push ourselves out of the songwriting mode and extend our craft a bit, if you like, and our capabilities, and understand a bit better about where we fit in the great scheme of the continuum of electronic music, what's it all about, learn about the history and the context. But the thing so we have made lots of music and sound works, they call them. But there's something about if you put the name A Man Called Out, I think we put something out on iTunes maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and it was a thing called Cold Genius, and it was all this sort of spectral freezing of pianos based around a bit of Henry Purcell's opera. Like a couple of chords from Henry Purcell, and then we'd done all this like weird experimental freezing, and my voice was all, and we stuck it up on iTunes as A Man Called Adam, and there was some review that said, what the hell is this sort of thing. So it's like, okay, you can't release things as A Man Called Adam. I suppose what I'm saying is there's a certain expectation with it. So we just weren't in that place to write. There's an expectation, and with certain songs that have been, of course, you don't want to spend your life trying to conform to people's expectations of what you're going to do. So it has to be right when you do it. One of the things is with A Man Called Adam's music, it's quite emotional. You have to dig quite deep. Although it's fairly abstracted on the surface, I hope that you're not sort of blurting out your own issues so much. It's meant to be kind of universal, but in order to get to that universal place, you have to dig pretty deep in your own emotional life. And I think we just didn't want to do that. There's something slightly more intellectual and thoughtful about experimental sound design. Whereas writing music that's emotionally engaging is more demanding emotionally.
Yeah.
So we'd sort of maybe just weren't ready to do that. And then one day we were.
And then one day you were.
And then one day you were. Yeah.
Brilliant.
It's as simple as that, really. I don't know how. I mean, I suppose there was a process with it. Steve was busy doing his PhD research, and I was a bit itchy to get on and try and do that. I think because I've been DJing a lot and just try to make some new music. So we'd get together, because he lives in Paris most of the time, and we'd get together and we'd throw a load of ideas, musical ideas down, and then he would go away and I would just tinker with the tracks and tinker with the lyric and do a lot of sort of evolve them, and then the process would start again. And so it evolved, and then we introduced our friend Paul, who's sort of quite jazzy and riffy and hooky, and he plays bass, so he's got a bass line sensibility. And then when you kind of throw all the bits together, that
it all came together.
Yeah, Farmarama is the resulting album.
Yeah. You did some good, put out a record store day remix package.
Yeah, that was nice. Yeah. Well, Prince Thomas did the remix on that, and yeah, we were thrilled with his remix. Really, he's a great artist. He's very generous. He's very. I asked if he would do it, and he said, "Send me the stems for this track, this track, this track, and this track." So we actually had no idea which track he was going to remix, which I love that. Dungan versions album he did, Haxan versions. It's here somewhere among all these obscure records. And they've got that slightly sort of krautrocky, motoric feel about them. Some of them are, one of the 12s is ambient, the other one's a bit more can-like, if you like. And I just loved that. Asked him to do it. He took the stems, and then one day he just sent back the Paul Valery mix, and it's a real Journey mix. It was so lovely for us because you're all over it. It's not one of those remixes where he's just sort of got rid of you and done his own thing. It was like working with an artist who kind of gets you, but also is confident and masterful in his own way. So when it came, it was like, yes. Steve had a little cry. He hates me telling everybody that. I'm like, yeah, Steve had a little cry.
We're not going to chop that bit out.
No, don't. He's got to suffer it. Men are allowed to cry. It's fine.
We are.
But then later on he said, he sort of qualified it a bit, he spoiled it a bit by saying, it was the way he made my iPad sing out.
I might have to chop that bit out.
No, it's like, only Steve. That's a sentence you will never hear anyone else say ever in your whole life. Only Steve could say that. It was the way he made my iPad sing out.
So that obviously went out for Record Store Day. You know, it's a massive thing, supporting vinyl and independent record shops and whatever. And you've kind of become a DJ in your own right. Is that a recent thing?
I suppose it is me in my own right. Steve and I always DJ'd together. At one point we were proper every weekend, always DJs. But we always DJ together, so it might be me for an hour or him for an hour, or I do half an hour and then he do. It was kind of like a DJ. So we always enjoyed selecting records and all of that sort of thing, but I'd never had that experience where you sort of take the room on a journey yourself with and it's quite a selfish thing, really. It's quite nice to these are my selections and I'm going to do it. And I started again a couple of years ago, and I'm surprised by how much I love it, actually. I really love it. It might be because of all that study and things. I think you bring that slightly contextualizing approach, which is what academic life is. It's all about finding the context for what you're doing or what anyone's doing. So now I love to link music together in a kind of joining the dots sort of way and
rediscovering things.
Yeah, absolutely. I love digging for the Balearic gold.
It's out there.
It's out there. It's always out there. It's always out there.
So they're probably two different beasts completely. I mean, we were talking before about you guys playing live as A Man Called Adam and touring and shorter gigs and things, and maybe a DJ set gives you that opportunity to take people on a journey, whereas a gig might just be you've just got to smash the album out.
Yeah, we're trying to find the way with live because we do pay a lot of attention to the detail of the records that we release, the actual recordings and the production of the records, but also we have amazing designers and all. We like to pay attention to the detail of everything, really, and so we're performing live now, and we just want to get that show to the same level of integrity, I suppose, that we hope we're applying to the other areas of your work. And yeah, at the moment you get booked to play for an hour, but I feel that there's a combination of the DJ plus the live thing that we need to explore a little bit, and we will.
There's a 3-hour Farmarama funk, jazz funk
there
fusion
is.
workout.
Yeah, exactly. There's a 3-hour Farmarama funk fusion workout.
Coming soon.
Yeah, coming soon.
Okay, and you guys run Other Records?
Yes.
As a label?
Yes.
You've worked with Chris Coco, Jose Padilla, all those kind of legends from that genre. Are you looking to potentially kind of ramp that up again? And
It's a funny one. We
now that you're a DJ,
I'm not sure we're going to be signing other people's music. Certainly commissioning remixes and interesting versions of things, definitely. At the moment, I don't have any plans to be signing other artists' music. There's too much to do. I suppose people always say this is our third studio album. We did actually make one in the early noughties that wasn't released, so this would have been our fourth studio album, but that's not a lot of records in 20, 30 years or whatever. So we're in a bit of a more prolific sort of mode, and for example, we're sort of halfway into a new EP for the autumn, which will be at least 3 brand new tracks, if not more, that aren't on Farmarama. So I just don't want to stop. I don't want to be thinking about other people. Sorry, sounds a bit selfish, doesn't it? I don't want to be thinking about other people's music, except in the context of how they might enhance the catalogue that we're releasing of A Man Called Adam at the moment.
Yeah.
So cool versions, cool remixes. We've got a brilliant remix for the next 12.
Can you tell us?
Yeah, it's a guy called DJ Alexander. He's a really young guy, 17, 18, I think he is. And he's it's just a really fluid little deep house sort of workout. He had a track called Yamaha recently, which I was just playing. I was DJing a lot, and it's so simple. I keep saying he's kind of like floating points without the maths. It's got that really sort of fresh. It's just really fresh, and his sounds are really fresh and simple. There's probably only like 5 things in the whole track. But he's done a remix of Higher Powers that we really like.
Great, I can't wait to hear.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So we've got one more 12 coming, and then hopefully a new EP.
Great. And then more after that, I suppose.
And more after that, yeah.
Period of creativity.
We just want to keep on it, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we'll be gigging a lot more, but I was reading, we had a girl called Hannah Van Sant came into the college where I teach, and she was Rihanna's keyboard player. And she was telling all the students were absolutely mesmerised because she works with Riri. She calls her Riri. And they have a studio bus. So Rihanna does her shows. She sleeps most of the day. She turns up for her shows. She does her shows. And then they go into the studio bus. And she'll work on recordings till like 3 or 4 a.m. Then go to her hotel and then sleep. And I thought, okay, well, we can't afford a studio bus. But maybe we have to get into the rhythm of working in hotel rooms and writing and just doing that stuff if we're going to be
drawing inspiration from your location.
Yeah,
we've got
different. Doing field recordings and all of that sort of cool stuff. Yeah, I hope that we can just keep up the work rate.
Yeah,
even if we're out gigging a lot.
You mentioned you're a lecturer at the Leeds College of Music. So, what do you think the pressures are about younger artists coming through?
I think it's not even about being an artist. I think if you're an artist, and especially the students at Leeds College of Music, they're lucky in lots of ways because they have an outlet for their emotional life. I think the world is incredibly challenging for young people at the moment. I think the complexities of the interaction and media interaction with the world, the climate crisis and the political... It's really tough for young people, and I think at least the ones who are allowed to and encouraged to make music or express themselves in some creative way are winning, really, because the ones who aren't have just got this shit show to deal with. Sorry.
That is the world.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's try and inspire some of our podcast listeners.
Yeah, sorry, that was a bit gloomy.
Don't worry.
That was a bit gloomy, wasn't it? But no, I mean, I love. That's the thing about teaching. It's just really nice to spend time with young people. I get as much from them as they get from me. I if not more. Just to know how they're thinking and feeling and engaging.
Gives you a different window on the world.
Yeah, and it reminds you of how, obviously, as you get older, you get sort of jaded or you don't appreciate the opportunities that life presents to you, and these young people, they'll do anything to have their music heard. They don't care about the money. They don't care about they don't care if it's two people and a dog as in the audience, as long as somebody's listening to what they have to say. And then you think about your life and all the amazing opportunities you have to be heard, and it makes you appreciate and value that. So that's what they give to me, which is pretty precious, really.
Amazing. Let's get onto the playlist then.
Oh God, right, okay.
We've kind of already mentioned it. So obviously these are the 5 tracks that we ask every interviewee to kind of choose. Choosing one is always difficult for a certain theme, I understand. But in terms of the catalyst, that first track that got you into dance music, you've already mentioned Frankie Knuckles' Tears.
Well, Tears, I suppose, was an acid house, sort of amazing acid house anthem, but it also was very emotional and poignant, and it seemed to sort of sum up a very particular moment in time. So it was a very powerful record. You can have this machine music, but the voice and the lyric, it is Robert Owens. Yeah. Come and sort of elevate that to something sort of deeply resonant emotionally. It's a gospel tradition, isn't it, that's there in it. And so that was a very powerful record. I do remember hearing Sylvester's Mighty Reel for the first time when I was just a little girl. I don't know when that was, when my sister brought it into the house, and it was like a 7-inch, and I remember just twirling around in my nightie, like a little Bry nylon nightie, and just going round and round and round the living room, and never really, and that disco sequence, so maybe an earlier catalyst, you might call
that high one. Energy, and the whole kind of Tears track as well. Like you said, it was, I suppose at that time the music that was coming out was very industrial, machine made, but it kind of gave it a bit more of a soulful edge.
I mean as a teenager, Luther Vandross, Alexander O'Neill, all of those singers were sort of, I'm from the northeast, it's northern, it's soul music, so I've always loved gospel voices. I love to hear great singing, emotional, so Tears was one of those, and I guess Mighty Reel as well, with that amazing falsetto, bonkers falsetto,
crazy voice.
But it's just that core of emotion that's in them.
You can really feel him shouting that out.
It's touching you in the deepest places.
So we're talking about the floor filler. What is your go-to floor filler?
Oh, as a DJ, I find these things so difficult because it's so reductive to go, which track do you do this and which. Sorry, I know you have to do it, but of course what your floor filler this week is different from your floor filler last week. So my floor filler, I'd be playing Barkay's tracks, or that's now. But I guess one that I've gone back to over the last year or so is that Walter Murphy track, A Fifth of Beethoven, which is very silly, cheesy kind of track, but it's just got such a rapacious groove to it. People can't resist it, and it's got some wicked funky keyboards on it, wicked analog keys, and I've noticed I do quite like a sort of semi-orchestral, something that's a bit soundtracky, and Beethoven's Fifth's quite, I love Beethoven as well.
Everyone loves Beethoven.
Everyone loves Beethoven. So what could be wrong about that? But it always works. It always funks the place up.
Yeah. So the Sunsetter, this was something you picked out.
Yeah, I just picked
Arp and Anthony Moore, Spinette,
yeah. So there's lots of amazing ambient music we could choose from. Sometimes I'll play a completely ambient set, and it'll be full of all sorts of amazing, minimal, spacious music that perfectly soundtracks the natural phenomena of a beautiful sunset, or a forest, or just the natural world. And those records, it could be any one of those.
Yeah.
But we've picked that one just because it's wonderful.
It was, we listened to it earlier. It was
Yeah,
awesome.
it could just do it, couldn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose so. Penguin Cafe Orchestra and all of Steve Reich and the famous people. But I was listening to Virginia Astley recently, and there's actually lots of wonderful new ambient music.
Yeah.
The Wolf Muller and the what's his name, Mudweiser, and all of those kind of. Yeah, there's Nicola Cruz, and there's wonderful new music to play in those contexts, as well as all this huge library and catalogue of amazing ambient music. So I think I'm happy just to pluck one out and go, that's a great record.
That's what I want to hear, something obscure and different that you're not going to hear anywhere else.
Yeah, you could pick one that, I can't even remember what I played at La Torre last time for a sundown. I can't remember what the actual... Might have been a Bob James track or something. Who knows?
Okay.
Yeah.
Different every time.
Yeah.
As a good DJ should do. So, the Tearjerker, what...
So I think I picked the Blue Nile, didn't I? Tinseltown in the Rain. Tearjerker's not quite the right thing. Records don't quite make me cry. Not really.
Yeah.
What I love about music is when it kind of fires you up. It sort of puts heat under your, it intensifies your kind of emotional state. And I think Tinseltown in the Rain always does that. I love the lyric. I think Blue Nile do that amazing thing where they are completely unique. No one will ever sound like that, and no one will ever structure their song like that, and no one will ever have that combination of instruments, and it's just very idiosyncratic. But Tinseltown in the Rain, it seems to have like a kind of rising chord progressions that do that thing that sort of is, do I love you? Yes, I love you. Will we always be happy-go-lucky? And it's always moving up a scale. So it does what it's meant to do, which kind of elevates you throughout the song. And I love that record.
It was great. You were playing earlier. It was great.
Yeah, it is. It is a spectacularly good record. I particularly like the lyric content because I suppose it's what I aspire to. You can hear that there's a person and an emotional life in there, so it's authentic, but it also has this big universality. It's what does it say? All men and women, here we are, caught up in this big rhythm. And I love that idea that there's a universality in there.
Everyone's connected.
Yeah.
And Blue Nile, like you said, they're quite idiosyncratic. Is that an inspiration for you guys as a man called Adam?
I think it's almost your default. You can't sort of sound like other people. I don't know, people used to say things like, why don't you just make a big banging house record and make yourself a load of money or something? And it was like, well, we probably would have if we could, if we knew how to do that. We don't. We just make things. And they always sound a bit odd and a bit strange, and they're just you, and that's it, and you're stuck with that, really. But I guess the thing that we've learned over all this time, I suppose, is to be confident in that. You don't have to like it.
You're idiosyncratic in your own skin. Yeah,
some people like it, some people don't. It's fine. It's just what you do, and you try and do it to the best. That thing doesn't go out the door until you've given it your best shot, and you've given it everything to make it as good enough. And then when it's gone, it's out of your hands. But that I think the Blue Nile are like that. I mean, they've only made like 3 albums in. I think they make one album every 20 years or something.
Kind of sounds familiar.
Yeah. So yeah, there's probably. I'm not comparing us to the Blue Nile, but I am. There is perhaps parallels in terms of output.
Okay, and so the crowd are calling for one more. You're DJing. What's your last tune?
What did I say for this one? So. Oh no, I remember. Yeah, every year, the last few years, I've DJ'd on New Year's Eve at Outlaws Yachts Club in Leeds, which is my friend Joe's bar, which is super cool. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about. Basically, I take you up to midnight, and then I play one song after after midnight. So that's the ultimate last record sort of thing, because it tips you into a new year and a new feeling. But I think this year I played Stoned Love by David Bowie, and the year before I did my own little re-edit of Slave to the Rhythm. And don't ask me why I picked those tracks. They just, again, it's sort of instinctive. You listen to lots of things and then just go, yeah, that's the one. That's the one I had to play. And Slave to the Rhythm, Grace.
Grace, you can't beat Grace.
You can't beat Grace. And she's an amazing inspiration to me as well. Yeah.
I think the last time I saw her, she was on stage doing the 9-minute version of Slave to the Rhythm with a hula hoop.
Yeah, I mean, her, she's 60. She's 70 now. 70, I think she's 70. Yeah. My friend Malcolm plays bass in her band, and so I'd sort of see all his pictures on Instagram and everything. She's just, and they are incredibly fond of her, which always makes me think she is the woman you think she is. I've never met her, but I think she is a wonderful person, as well as a great artist, and a unique being, force of nature. Yeah,
bang on.
Yeah.
So we'll wrap this up with one final question. The question is, what does house culture mean to you?
I suppose if we talk about house culture, because I am part of the house culture, I listen to house music all the time. I've just commissioned house remixes. Me and Steve have just made a house remix, a banging house remix. House music is part of who we are. But as a culture, I think certainly people who were sort of present at the beginning of acid house, when it appeared in the late 80s and early 90s, we are the old school. But old school is relevant and important now. It's a sort of state of being. I just saw a Moody Man just posted a Prince live performance, and he's saying, we're the old school, and I loved it. And we're kind of the generation that experienced it firsthand, and then it's existed, and it's a great network. It's a great loving network of friendships, and we are all united and connected through that, and we've all grown up with that, and now and it's our responsibility to communicate it and what happened in that time, that amazing, glorious time, to continue to communicate that to the people who come through and the young people who become interested in music, and to keep pointing them to the people and the originators and the people. You know this record you love. Well, have you listened to Sly and the Family Stone? Go and listen to a Funkadelic record. It's important for us to communicate that. And so that's what house culture means to me. Because it's full of love, and it's full of open-spirited generosity and tolerance. And there's nothing more important to communicate right now than that. And that's what house culture is to me.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That is brilliant. Yeah, thank you. Cool.
Sorry, I was in right bloody...
Oh, no, don't worry. That's fine.
House culture.
Now, wasn't that just lovely? A big thanks to Sally for finding the time to sit down with us and chat all things Balearic. Make sure you go out and listen to that new A Man Called Adam album, Farmarama, available in all the usual places. It's a fantastic listen that will instantly transport you to the beaches of the White Isle. What can be better than that? And once you've given that a listen, make sure you queue up the Prince Thomas remix of the album closer Paul Valerie at the Disco. That's that special record store day release that conjured so much emotion amongst the band when they first heard it. And wasn't it amazing to hear that there is potentially a director's cut of the short film about chilling documentary locked away in a Channel 4 vault somewhere? Wouldn't that be fascinating to see now? If you haven't ever seen that short film that we're talking about, just search short film about chilling on YouTube and prepare to get yourself immersed in an Ibiza that was only just emerging as a destination for house music hedonism. As always, you can find the tracks that we discussed on House Culture's Perfect playlist on Spotify. So make sure you search for that and follow it to keep yourself up to date with all the choices from our podcast guests. And I couldn't resist, so I've added in a couple of the A Man Called Adam tracks that we discussed. These being Amoeba, That's the one with a cut up No Happy Faces lyric that Sally mentioned. And of course their unbeatable Balearic classic Barefoot in the Head. Again, that's House Culture, perfect playlist on Spotify. And when you're there, make sure you follow the podcast as well so that you never miss out on future House Culture podcast releases. Then once you're done there, please love, like, tweet, share, tell your friends, leave us a review. We could always get you a shout out on a future episode, much like Ali Mackenzie here, who got in touch to tell us how inspirational he found our Brandon Block interview. Thanks very much, Ali. I'm sure Mr. Block is also very happy to hear that. And if you listeners haven't heard that Brandon Block episode, what are you waiting for? It's available in our back catalogue right now. And why don't you come and follow us and get your daily fix of house culture by hitting up our Instagram feed at houseculturenet or by following the hashtag #TrueHouseCulture. And finally, you can reach out to me, Matt Rouse, directly on Instagram at DJ Matt Rouse. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
House Culture.